In the dense, shadowy jungles of West Bengal, there stood an old, decrepit house that had been abandoned for decades. The locals called it the Whispering House, because on quiet nights, eerie whispers could be heard emanating from its walls. No one dared to go near it, especially after sunset. The house was built in the early 1900s by a wealthy British officer named Colonel Edward Hastings. He had moved to India with his wife, Margaret, and their young daughter, Emily. The house was a grand mansion back then, with sprawling gardens and a beautiful view of the nearby river. But tragedy struck the Hastings family when Emily fell ill with a mysterious disease and died within a week. Margaret, heartbroken, took her own life shortly after. Colonel Hastings, consumed by grief, disappeared without a trace, leaving the house to decay. Years passed, and the house became a source of fear and superstition among the villagers. They believed that the spirits of the Hastings family still lingered there, trapped in a cycle of sorrow and despair. Strange occurrences were reported by those who ventured too close. Ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and sudden drops in temperature. The house seemed to have a life of its own, feeding off the fear it generated. One rainy evening, a young journalist named Arjun decided to investigate the house for a story. He had heard the tales and was skeptical, believing them to be mere folklore. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, he made his way through the dense jungle, the rain pelting down on him. As he approached the house, he felt a chill run down his spine. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of raindrops hitting the leaves. Front door creaked open as Arjun pushed it, revealing a dark, musty interior. The smell of decay and mold was overwhelming. He stepped inside, his flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The house was in ruins, with broken furniture and shattered windows. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly drapes. Arjun began to explore, taking pictures and making notes. As he moved deeper into the house, he felt an unsettling presence, as if he were being watched. He shrugged it off, attributing it to his imagination. But then he heard it. Faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of the rain. He froze, straining to listen. The whisper grew louder, more distinct. It was a woman's voice, filled with sorrow. "Emily, my sweet Emily." Arjun's heart raced. Followed the sound, his flashlight flickering. The voice led him to a small, dusty room at the back of the house. Inside, he found an old, tattered diary lying on a table. He picked it up and began to read. It was Margaret's diary, detailing her grief and despair after Emily's death. The last entry was particularly chilling. "I can hear her, my sweet Emily. She calls to me from the shadows. I must go to her. I must." Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and Arjun could see his breath in the air. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. He felt a cold hand on his shoulder and spun around, but there was no one there. Panic set in, and he stumbled out of the room, desperate to escape. But the house seemed to come alive, the walls closing in on him. The whispers turned into anguished screams, echoing through the halls. Arjun ran, his flashlight flickering and dying. He was plunged into darkness, the screams growing louder, more deafening. He could feel the presence of the spirits, their cold, clammy hands reaching out to him. He tripped and fell, his camera smashing to the ground. As he lay there, he saw a figure standing over him. A woman in a tattered dress, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Help me. Find my Emily." Arjun scrambled to his feet and bolted for the door. He burst out into the rain, gasping for breath. The whispers and screams faded, replaced by the sound of the storm. He didn't stop running until he reached the village, drenched and trembling. He tried to tell the villagers what he had experienced, but they only shook their heads. They had warned him, after all. Arjun never returned to the Whispering House. He left the village soon after, unable to shake the memories of that night. The house remained, a dark, brooding presence in the jungle, its whispers continuing to haunt those who dared to listen. And so the legend of the Whispering House lived on, a chilling reminder of the sorrow and despair that lingered within its walls. The spirits of the Hastings family remained trapped, their whispers echoing through the night, forever seeking solace that would never come.